They say the Sabbath is only for Adventists. That it's their thing, their custom, their doctrine. But let me tell you something, family. The Sabbath doesn't belong to any denomination. It's not a church trademark. It's not a logo you print on your sign. The Sabbath belongs to God. It is not an Adventist invention. It's a divine creation. Before there was a Seventh-day Adventist, before there was even a Jew, there was a garden. And in that garden, on the seventh day, God himself rested, blessed and sanctified that day as holy. When man tries to claim ownership of what God created, truth becomes religion, and faith becomes pride. The Sabbath was never given to a group of people. It was given to all humanity. The very first full day of human life was spent in rest, in worship, in communion with the Creator. That's not a denominational teaching. That's creation reality. The Sabbath wasn't born at Sinai. It was born in Eden. It's older than Israel, older than Moses, older than law. It is a covenant between God and his creation. You see, when people say the Sabbath is only for Adventists, what they're really saying is obedience is optional. They've mistaken grace for permission. They've confused mercy with compromise. But grace doesn't remove the command. It empowers you to keep it. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. That means it was designed for everyone. For the weary soul, the burdened worker, the restless heart. It's heaven's weekly reminder that you are more than what you produce. You are who he purchased. The tragedy is that even those who claim to keep the Sabbath have started acting like it's theirs, as if they own it, instead of being owned by the one who gave it. They've turned it into a mark of superiority instead of a sign of surrender. But God didn't give the Sabbath to separate Adventists from others. He gave it to separate light from darkness, creation from confusion, truth from tradition. When the Sabbath is limited to a denomination, it loses its power. When it's reclaimed as the covenant of the Creator, it becomes a worldwide invitation. That's why in Isaiah 56 God says, "My house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations." Even the foreigner who joins himself to the Lord and keeps the Sabbath is blessed. The Sabbath was meant to unite humanity under God's authority, not divide them under human labels. The real issue is this: people are comfortable with a religion that fits them, not one that changes them. The Sabbath exposes the difference between those who claim to worship God and those who actually surrender to him. Because when you keep the Sabbath, you declare with your life that God is the ruler of your time, your purpose, and your heart. You're saying, "I trust the Creator more than I trust culture." That's not Adventism. That's obedience. So no, the Sabbath is not only for Adventists. It's for every man, woman, and child who longs to live in sync with heaven. It's for the one seeking peace in a restless world. It's for the truth seeker who refuses to bow to tradition. It's for those who understand that worship is not a song you sing, but a life you live. The Sabbath was not meant to brand a religion. It was meant to bless a world. And when the end comes, when the final test divides truth from tradition, it won't matter what name is on your church. It'll only matter whose name is written on your heart. The Sabbath isn't about Adventists. It's about allegiance. It's not a denominational sign. It's a divine sign. And the day is coming when those who stand on that truth will shine brighter than ever before. Because the Sabbath is not man's property. It's God's promise. The Sabbath began in Eden, not at Sinai. Before there was a nation called Israel, before there was a man named Moses, before the 10 Commandments were written on stone, there was a garden. And in that garden, God himself rested. The Sabbath began in Eden, not at Sinai. It wasn't born out of religious law, but divine love. It wasn't introduced to control man, but to connect him with his Creator. On the seventh day of creation, when the dust of the earth had already become flesh, and the stars were already hung in the heavens, God did something profound. He rested, blessed, and sanctified that day. That act wasn't for his benefit, but for ours. From the very beginning, the Sabbath carried the DNA of relationship. It was God saying to humanity, "Come sit with me, walk with me, and remember who you are." It was the first full day of human life. Adam's first sunrise and first sunset were spent in communion with his Maker. Think about that. Man began not by working, not by striving, but by resting in what God had already done. The Sabbath was never meant to be a rule to follow, but a rhythm to live by. A divine heartbeat, reminding man that his worth isn't found in what he does, but in who made him. When people say the Sabbath started at Sinai, they miss the truth that Sinai was just a renewal of what Eden began. The command to remember the Sabbath day wasn't introducing something new, it was calling humanity back to something ancient. You can't remember what you never knew. God was reminding his people of a covenant that predates sin, religion, and nationhood. The covenant of rest. When he wrote that commandment with his own finger, he was writing a reminder of his own example in creation. The Sabbath was built into the very fabric of time. Every week that passes, the seventh day returns, like a sacred echo of creation's completion. It's not Jewish time, Adventist time, or religious time. It's holy time, a divine appointment that has never been canceled. God didn't bless any other day. He didn't sanctify any other space in time, only the seventh. So when man tries to change it or move it, he's not just rearranging a calendar. He's challenging the Creator's authority. In Eden there was no sin, no temple, no rituals, just pure relationship between God and humanity. The Sabbath was the expression of that relationship. A day set apart, not for ceremony, but for connection. It was God's way of saying, even in perfection, I want to spend time with you. That's why it still matters today. It's not about legalism. It's about loyalty. It's not about rules. It's about relationship. At Sinai, when God reintroduced the Sabbath, he wasn't creating something new for the Israelites. He was restoring something lost through slavery. For centuries, they had been told when to work, when to sleep, when to serve. Egypt owned their time. But God, in his mercy, gave them the Sabbath as a declaration of freedom. You are no longer slaves, he said. You are mine. And in that same spirit, the Sabbath still sets us free from the slavery of busyness, from the worship of productivity, from the illusion that we are our own providers. The Sabbath is a return to Eden, a taste of what life was before sin entered the world. It reminds us that rest is not laziness, it's holiness. It's the rhythm of heaven breaking into the rush of earth. It's a sign that creation still remembers its Creator. So no, the Sabbath didn't begin at Sinai. It began at the beginning. It was the first gift ever given to mankind, a divine handshake between God and his children. And when we honor that same seventh day today, we're not practicing religion, we're participating in creation. We're stepping back into that garden moment where everything was very good, and God's presence filled the air. The Sabbath isn't just a day off, it's a day home, a return to the origin before religion, before confusion, before division. It's the eternal reminder that we came from God, we belong to God, and one day we'll rest with him again in perfect peace. The Sabbath was made for humanity. When Jesus said, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath, he wasn't just correcting a misunderstanding, he was restoring a divine truth, lost through tradition. The Sabbath was never designed to be a burden. It was a blessing, crafted for the good of all humanity. From the beginning of time, it was God's weekly gift, a sacred space of rest, reflection, and relationship that transcends religion, race, and ritual. The Sabbath was made for humanity, for every heart that longs for peace in a restless world. In a world driven by speed, deadlines, and endless striving, the Sabbath stands as God's antidote to burnout and spiritual blindness. It reminds humanity that rest is not optional. It's sacred. It's the pause that gives meaning to progress. The Sabbath invites every soul to step off the treadmill of survival and remember who truly sustains life. Long before the first nation was formed or a single law was written, God wove rest into the fabric of creation. He knew that the human heart, made in his image, needed more than bread to live. It needed his presence. When Jesus walked the dusty roads of Galilee, he saw how the religious leaders had distorted this holy gift. They turned it into a system of control, filled with restrictions and fear. Instead of freedom, people found frustration. Instead of joy, they found judgment. And yet, Christ came to remind them of the original purpose. The Sabbath was made for humanity, for you, for me, for every weary soul on earth. It wasn't a religious fence. It was a divine doorway, a weekly encounter with the Creator who says, "Come unto me, and I will give you rest." The Sabbath is not limited by denomination. It doesn't belong to Adventists, Jews, or any religious group. It belongs to humanity. It's God's signature on time, declaring that every human being has value, not because of what they produce, but because of who made them. When God rested, He wasn't tired. He was teaching. He was showing the world that rest is divine, that reflection is holy, and that relationship is more important than results. Every seventh day, God calls us to slow down and reconnect, not only with Him, but with each other. Families rebuild, minds renew, and souls find stillness in a world that never stops talking. This is why the Sabbath matters today more than ever. Humanity has become enslaved to the idol of busyness. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor and call chaos a lifestyle. We've forgotten how to breathe. But the Sabbath whispers, "You were never meant to live this way." It calls us back to balance, back to peace, back to purpose. It's God's way of reminding humanity that they are more than their labor, more than their titles, more than their to-do list. The Sabbath is a sanctuary in time, where heaven touches earth, and the Creator embraces creation. Jesus showed that the Sabbath is not about avoiding work, but about restoring life. He healed the sick, lifted the broken, and brought freedom on that day, proving that doing good is never against God's law. Every miracle He performed on the Sabbath was a sermon in action. It revealed that rest and restoration walk hand in hand. He was showing that the Sabbath isn't about rules. It's about relationship. It's about being made whole again. When humanity honors the Sabbath, it honors the design of life itself. It acknowledges that time belongs to God, and that life finds meaning when lived in harmony with His rhythm. It's not about earning salvation. It's about enjoying it. Every sunset that ushers in the Sabbath is a divine reminder that we are still loved, still invited, still called to rest in Him. The Sabbath was made for humanity, for every mother holding her child after a long week, for every man burdened by work and worry, for every young person searching for meaning. It is the heartbeat of creation, the pulse of divine compassion echoing through time. It says to every soul, "You are not forgotten. You are not what you do. You are mine." And when we honor the Sabbath, we step into that truth, not as slaves to a law, but as children embracing their Father's gift of perfect peace. The Sabbath is a sign of relationship, not religion. The Sabbath has never been about ritual. It's always been about relationship. From the dawn of creation, God didn't create the Sabbath to establish a religion. He created it to establish connection. When He rested on the seventh day, He wasn't instituting a rule book. He was inviting humanity into His rhythm. The Sabbath was God's way of saying, "I want time with you." It's the eternal sign between Creator and creation, not to control us, but to remind us who we belong to. In Exodus 31:13, God said, "Surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you." Notice that word sign. The Sabbath is like a wedding ring in time. It's not salvation itself, but it points to it. Just as a ring symbolizes a covenant between two people, the Sabbath symbolizes a covenant between God and His people. Every seventh day, when the world races ahead, those who pause are saying, "I remember you. I belong to you. My heart rests in you." Religion often tries to turn what's relational into something mechanical. It reduces the Sabbath to a checklist. What to do, what not to do. But God's original intent was far deeper. He didn't say, "Keep this day to prove your holiness." He said, "Keep this day to remember my love." The Sabbath is not a test of worthiness. It's a reminder of belonging. It's God's weekly declaration that his children are not slaves to this world. They are free, chosen, and loved. When people view the Sabbath as a mere religious observance, they miss its heartbeat. Religion says, do this to earn favor. Relationship says, rest because you already have it. The Sabbath invites us to rest not because we're tired of work, but because we're tired of wandering. It's the call to return to the one who made us. It's not about escaping the world. It's about entering into his presence. That's why the Sabbath is holy. Not because of what we do on it, but because of who meets us there. Throughout Scripture, God used the Sabbath as a mark of intimacy between him and his people. It was a visible reminder that he is the source of life, the sustainer of creation, and the sanctifier of the soul. In Ezekiel 20:12, he said, moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. That's relationship. God didn't say the Sabbath makes you holy because you keep it. He said, you keep it because I make you holy. When Jesus came, he didn't abolish that relationship. He deepened it. The Pharisees had turned the Sabbath into a burden. They worshiped the day instead of the Lord of the day. But Jesus reminded them, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. He reclaimed it as an act of love, not legalism. Every healing he performed on the Sabbath was a restoration of what that day truly meant: freedom, renewal, and relationship. The Sabbath was made for man's benefit, to reconnect humanity with its source. Even today, the Sabbath remains a sanctuary in time. It's where the noise of the world fades and the voice of God grows clear again. It's the day when heaven leans closer, when the Creator whispers, be still and know that I am God. The Sabbath relationship isn't confined to a church pew. It's experienced in the stillness of the heart, in family prayer, in nature, in worship, in gratitude. It's the time when love takes precedence over labor. Religion builds walls, but relationship builds bridges. The Sabbath is one of those bridges, stretching from Eden to eternity. It connects humanity's beginning with its destiny. In the new earth, Isaiah 66:23 says, from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me. That's the eternal continuation of a relationship that started long before sin. The Sabbath began in love, and it will end in love. So the Sabbath isn't about being Adventist, Jewish, or religious. It's about being his. It's about the Creator carving out a space in time to meet his creation. When you honor the Sabbath, you're not joining a denomination. You're answering a divine invitation. You're saying, I choose relationship over religion, intimacy over institution, the Creator over culture. Because in the end, the Sabbath isn't just a command. It's a conversation. It's God saying, I made you, I miss you, come rest with me. Denominational ownership destroys divine purpose. One of the greatest tragedies of modern Christianity is how something divine has been confined within denominational walls. The Sabbath, which was meant to unite all humanity under one Creator, has instead been labeled and limited by religious ownership. When people say the Sabbath belongs to the Adventists, they reduce a heavenly covenant to a human institution. Denominational ownership destroys divine purpose because what God gave to the world has no denominational boundaries. The Sabbath was made for man, not for a movement, not for a religion, not for a... The moment we start claiming ownership over what God has given to all, we distort its purpose. The Sabbath is not an Adventist idea. It's a divine identity. It doesn't belong to a church. It belongs to the Creator. When a denomination begins to brand what was meant to bless the world, it creates exclusivity where there should be invitation. The Sabbath was never meant to be a trademark. It was meant to be a testimony. God didn't reserve it for one group of believers. He blessed it for all creation. In Genesis 2:3, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work. There were no denominations then, No doctrines, no divisions, just God and humanity in harmony. That sacred rest was not a denominational event. It was a universal gift. But over time, as religion became more structured, men began to build walls around what God had opened to all. When the Sabbath became institutionalized, it began to lose its relational essence. Instead of being a bridge to God, it became a banner for identity politics within the church. The danger of denominational ownership is that it breeds pride instead of purpose. When a church begins to say, "We have the truth," it unintentionally suggests that others do not. But truth was never meant to be possessed. It was meant to be proclaimed. The Sabbath truth is not about who keeps it best. It's about who understands its heart. God never said, "The Sabbath is for the Adventists." He said, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." That command was written not for one group, but for all of humanity. The very purpose of the Sabbath is to remind us that God is the creator of all, not just of a particular denomination. When a church takes ownership of it, it risks turning God's universal sign into a badge of exclusivity. It becomes a symbol of us and them, instead of his and ours. And that shift destroys the beauty of the message. The Sabbath was designed to reveal God's character, his love, his holiness, his desire for relationship. But when human ego and institutional control take over, the message becomes tainted with pride and self-righteousness. Jesus confronted this same spirit in the Pharisees. They thought they owned the Sabbath, that they defined what it meant to keep. But Jesus shattered their exclusivity by showing that the Sabbath was meant for healing, not hierarchy. He healed the sick, lifted the broken, and restored the outcast on the Sabbath to remind the world that no man, no religion, and no denomination can own what God has made holy. The Lord of the Sabbath cannot be contained by a system. When denominations claim ownership of God's truth, they unintentionally push people away from it. Many in the world reject the Sabbath, not because they hate God's law, but because they think it's an Adventist. The moment we label divine truth, we limit divine reach. The Sabbath is for the tired businessman in the city, the single mother struggling to survive, the atheists searching meaning, the believer hungering for peace. It's for all. Denominational ownership destroys divine purpose because it shifts focus from God to man, from revelation to reputation. The Sabbath is not about what church you attend. It's about who your Creator is. It's a call to relationship, not religion. When humanity reclaims the Sabbath as God's universal gift, walls will fall and hearts will awaken. The Sabbath was never meant to divide us. It was meant to remind us that in the end, we all rest under one Creator, one purpose, and one eternal promise.